Hi, Jerry. Okay, so first of all, thank you guys for joining. My name is Danielle, and I'm on the training and support team here at Hawks Learning. Our speaker today is Professor Emily Carpenter of Seminole State College. Professor Emily has been an educator for over 15 years with experiences ranging from early childhood education to higher education. Most recently, she has had the privilege of teaching various math courses at Seminole State College in rural Oklahoma, where she also serves as the transitional math coordinator. With a master's degree from Oklahoma State University in special education, she is passionate about the exciting transition to corequisite classes as SSC continues to strive to provide rigor yet equity in their mathematics courses. We are excited that Professor Carpenter is here to share her experience and insight with us today on the 5 W's of math pathways and corequisites. So we do have a larger audience, and we'll do our very best to get to all your questions at the end. Alex is also part of the training and support team here at Hawks Learning. She is joining us today in the background and will be answering all of the questions throughout. So please enter those into the Q&A portion as we go. If you have any questions for Professor Carpenter at the end, we will save this for her and she'll be able to help us then. So on that note, I will go ahead and hand it over to our presenter, and the floor is yours.
Thanks, Danielle. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay, and I am excited to be here. I was telling Danielle and Alex that we are in our second week of classes here at Seminole State, and so I'm absolutely living out everything I'm about to talk about, but with a whole new spin. And so we'll talk a little bit about all the challenges that the pandemic has brought to us and how we're addressing some of those as we go throughout the semester, and the new challenges daily. So I would welcome any if you have any ideas, I'll share my email address at the end. But if I speak to something and you have something that's working, then I would love for this to be a collaborative type of experience. So I'll share my experience, but then would love to hear if you guys have things that are working. Please reach out to me, or even in the Q&A section as well. Would love to hear that. So let's talk a little bit about who we are. Now, I'm only one of a team. Unfortunately, with everything else going on, we've all been pulled in different ways. And so I'm the only one here, but I absolutely can't take credit for everything that we have done. We are small, so there are actually like about 2 3/4 of us full-time. Dr. Goller has actually moved into administration, but we're pretty lucky to have our Vice President of Academic Affairs to be a former math educator. So she's been very friendly and has been very instrumental at the state level with corecs and pathways. So these are I wasn't able to pull new fall 19. As you can imagine, all of the statistics and everything are a little bit, trying to get data is a little bit slower than typical. They didn't have the typical rollover spring, summer. So, but this should be, I just wanted you to get a picture of who we are, and this should still hold pretty true. I mean, obviously the values may be a bit different, but we are about 1,500 students. We do have 75% under the age of 20, but we do have, that doesn't mean not necessarily traditional types of students. We have a lot of students that are, young parents that are living independently, even if they're still within that age range. Quite a bit of our students fit the non-traditional type of, scheme. 28% Native American, and then 45% of students have an ACT score of 10 to 19. We actually don't require an ACT score. That you come in and take our placement test. So we have quite a few students that come in that actually have never taken the ACT. So you can imagine that our developmental, our math developmental classes, our transitional classes, as we call them, are quite high, the percentages of students in there. And so I believe last semester, 65% of our students were coming non-prepared for college level math. So In 2017, we actually moved to we decided to just pull off the Band-Aid, basically, is what we ended up doing. And I will say statewide, we had some initiatives, and we saw that that all this conversation about corequisites was coming into play. There was a lot of national discussion about that, and then we were offering 2 pathways at the time, and we decided to move to 4 pathways. And we decided to do it all in the same semester, which was very interesting and very exciting, but very challenging at the same time. So we basically revamped our entire math instruction, our math pathways, and what that looks like for students. So in the past, we had a prerequisite model, a very traditional type of prerequisite model that had changed and evolved throughout the years a little bit. And we had started playing around with a CoReq in 2014, and we had quite a bit of success with that. But it was only, we started out with 1 section and put a CoReq with a college algebra. And then we had some good qualitative data from it. We had, of course, the success rate of the course, but we were handpicking the students that could go into that CoReq. So basically, if they had a good grade and good attendance in basic algebra, then we let them go in this CoReq. And so we knew that it was successful, and we liked the structure of it, but then we were nervous, a little hesitant to do that for all of our students. But that's what we ended up doing, just because we were still, you'll see our numbers, but our retention rate was low. Our students getting through the math sequence was low. And so then at the state level, we started having all these conversations about moving away from the traditional college algebra being the single track. And for a lot of different reasons, there's been a big push in our state to move towards statistics. We have one of our big universities that is now requiring that along with their gen ed math. And so they were having this conversation about, we were getting some push to go on and put that statistics in. And we already had the quantitative reasoning, and so we had the college algebra and quantitative reasoning those were our 2 pathways. And then we decided to add in the statistics, and then we decided to take our college algebra and rename it and the pre-calc, because we wanted to really make sure that students understood they were calc bound at that point. Although we were offering the statistics course, we had a lot of students still enrolling in college algebra because that's what their parents had, that's what they took, that's what their high school counselor was telling them to take, and they just didn't seem to really understand that we had these new pathways that we were really trying to align with their degree plans. We were talking to the degree program mentors and saying, hey, what do your students need to know for their field, and then really trying to tailor their math courses for that. And students just really weren't understanding that. So we named them pre-calc and then split our college algebra. We had the 1513, which was the traditional college algebra course number, and renamed it pre-calc. And it's our STEM pathway. You can see the different majors, how those play out kind of for each one of these pathways. And then we renamed our other one pre-calc for business bio. And those are our students that are biology bound, but are a lot of them will go to business calc. So both of those classes are still calc bound, but different types of calc. And so we really try to focus in on the types of questions. 1523 is called a functions course as well. And so we went to 4 pathways. We do offer corequisites for all of those courses now, and have had a lot of success with really helping students, number one, understand that look at the different fields that they're going into, and providing them with experiences that are applicable to their fields, and making math more of an applicable type of learning experience, as opposed to one more stale algebraic course that they have to take in their sequence. So this all happened about the same time we were moving to corequisites as well. And you can see these are just our ACT cut scores. Sometimes people ask about these. So I'll just briefly talk about that just a little bit. So we went actually 100% corequisite in fall of 2017. And we did then have a small group of students that kind of self-identified saying that they wanted basic algebra back. They wanted to take, if they'd been out of math for 20 years, they wanted to take a class to help them get ready to go on and take particularly our two pre-calcs, the business bio and then the pre-calc. And just a side note, in case you're wondering about text, we use the college algebra text for pre-calc for business bio, and we use the pre-calc text for the 15-13. So we actually use two different textbooks for that. And so what we did was then after that fall semester, we added in one section of basic algebra. And you see that that's our math 0104. And if they are going to quantitative reasoning or statistics, we go on and just put them in the corequisite. That's the basic algebra is not an option. But if students don't feel ready, or if they have that ACT below 15, then they have the option of going on and taking basic algebra before they hit those pre-calcs. And it's very, it's very algebraic based. That way we can tailor it. It's not this general math prerequisite that we used to. They do a lot of technology integration in the class, really teach the students how to utilize their calculator, their graphing calculator. And we only offer that in the fall. And so we still have it there because we felt like there was enough of a cry from students to say, like, hey, I know it's going to take me 2 semesters, but that way if they take it in the fall, they can then take their pre-calc in the spring, and we're still getting them through their math courses in 2 semesters. And so we do still have the basic algebra, but it's just one section, and we just offer it in the fall. And so we did all of this. This kind of a little bit of our timeline. We went to the 3 pathways, and we did add the 4th one, the functions, in spring of 18. And then we were a little bit ahead of the curve, but our statewide, then we implemented pathways. So this is something that everybody in our state is talking about and going to, and and nationally as well. So it's been pretty fun to collaborate with some of our other institutions, and it's an ever evolving, changing type of situation, trying to match what our transfer institutions are doing and what they're saying they need. And so some of our past issues, really what drove this statewide, but particularly, our conversations, they weren't graduating because they couldn't get through the math courses. And if you had 3 semesters of math, when I came to Seminole State, that's where we were at. I actually started in transitional, teaching basic algebra, intermediate algebra, and then, finally college algebra. And so it was taking them 3 semesters. If they failed a semester, it was taking them 4 semesters. It was just very daunting. And it is a prerequisite for a lot of our science courses. So especially like our health science majors, it would put them out several semesters before they could even really start in their coursework. We would have to kind of design these other, classes and everything as they're trying to dig through their math. And then students were not being placed in relevant math classes. We were still having students get to, biology, for instance, and there was some basic math skills that they didn't have, that they really, some applicable type of, relevant questions that they should have been able to go through and read some of the graphs and decipher, and they just weren't able to do that. And we were spending a lot of time still in our college algebra class doing a lot of hand graphing and, maybe arguably things that weren't going to be as applicable to them in some of their coursework. So we were still, although we would get them through their math courses, we would have, our instructors, particularly our science instructors, would come to us and say, these students are not great problem solvers. Like, we don't understand what's happening. And so we really, we had to really evaluate if we are getting them through this whole structure, several semesters, and then we still weren't producing students that could then utilize those math skills in other sorts of situations. We were doing something wrong. And so that was personally the push for us to move to those different pathways. We just weren't getting students through. You can see that our percentages were really low. We were getting, they went up just a little bit. I think we were in the 20s before this. In 2014 is when we put the COREQ model in for the 1 section of college algebra. So it helped a little bit, but 30 30%-ish. I mean, I'm not okay with 30%. My students aren't okay with 30% on a test. So we definitely weren't okay with getting 30% of our students completion through math. So basically what was happening is math was the biggest hurdle our at-risk students were facing, and we were failing them. We were getting very few of them through. So I think I've already talked a little bit about offering those pathways, and then moving through, and then offering the 4 pathways. So we have the 4 pathways, and we have co-rec models for all 4 pathways, or co-rec classes. Of course, you can imagine, you guys are all instructors, so you're sitting there thinking about all the different hurdles that we had as we were moving to all of these, between the co-rec and then the different pathways. So now that we're getting students through in one semester, it's really been interesting trying to figure out scheduling, trying to figure out how we're going to schedule where we aren't teaching 1 bazillion hours in the fall and no classes in the spring. And we've done some work with even our contracts. Our contracts are split a little bit differently. It's been pretty difficult with high schools. We've done a lot of work with going out and talking to high school counselors, sending them information and just letting them know, let your students know that they at least need to have a meta major in mind. Like, we need to put them in an applicable pathway. And so what do they need to come to us and have an idea of where they want to go. Even if they don't have a specific degree, we need to make sure we get them in the correct pathway. And so we've had some challenges, but like I said, we continue to adapt. And we've got a really good support structure from our administration down. So we have limited our special topics classes to 22 students. I'll talk a little bit about what those even look like in a second. But there's been some structure or some scheduling structure challenges with that, because they want to overload our classes, and it's in a computer lab, and they can't do that because there's not enough seats. And so the credit bearing course has a bigger limit, and we did that purposely because we're wanting that balance. We don't want to teach students, I mean, they need to be in the computer lab as well, but we really would love to have a 50-50 split. And I mean, that goes back to a whole other discussion you can have about inclusion from a special education standpoint. I mean, that's, all of that philosophy really holds true even still. And so if we could have that split in our classes, which is a little bit a challenge sometimes to scheduling. And that's attempting to create a differentiated class. And then we have developed online courses for each pathway except for our 15, 13. And so we're actually in the process of developing that. So we got these, and then of course with COVID, we have really changed this summer and are now teaching a couple of online co-recs. I'm going to speak to that in just a little bit. Within all of this, as we looked at those various pathways, we really tried to integrate a lot more problem-based learning, and we really appreciate all the projects that Hawks has. Several of us utilize some of those Hawks projects for our courses. And so just really doing a lot more problem-based learning and making sure students are understanding how to utilize these math concepts in various types of situations. So when they do go on and transition to those science courses, or whatever courses they're taking, even if it's psychology courses and they're talking about statistics, that we've done a good enough job in our classrooms because we have these pathways, and then we can really focus on these various degree fields and students, then they can utilize those skills in lots of situations. So if we don't give them those opportunities in class, then they can't do that. But obviously that is challenging in itself, and it takes time. And so we are constantly trying to collaborate and share. So once again, if you guys have some great ideas, then please share those as well. I always love hearing from other other educators and what they have working for them. So what does our CoRec actually look like? So we know why we went to the CoRec model. You can let the philosophy behind it, but sometimes just the actual, like, okay, what does that even look like? That is the daunting part. So we actually are more of a flipped classroom type of approach. It typically follows, so our face-to-face model, so I'll talk face-to-face and I'll talk online. Our face-to-face model, it almost always bumps right up, unless there's some weird scheduling change with like a one student or something. It almost always bumps up to the credit-bearing course. And so we actually call our CoRecs special topics courses. So if you hear me say special topics, that's what I'm meaning. And so we usually like it to come afterwards, but sometimes because of scheduling, especially in the fall, I will have a CoRec before the credit bearing, and I'll have one afterwards, and we'll kind of have students split between those because of scheduling. But either way, I'm either seeing students directly before or directly after. They're not coming every day. It's, you know, if they have stat Monday, Wednesday, Friday, then I have them for special topics Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Like I said, typically directly after. It is in a lab setting. We are using Hawks Learning, and so it is, and we use the integrated review as a part of that as well. And so it looks different for every instructor, and it looks different every day. And of course, right now it's looking substantially different because we've got masks on and trying to socially distance and such. And we are actually face-to-face and or blended right now, and online. So we're teaching all the modes right now, and every day is a bit different. But students come, and we have found that they, especially if we can keep it to where they come with the same cohort, that's really desirable. I mean, really, like, the perfect situation is I get to teach my own special topics, which most of the time happens, but sometimes we'll have an adjunct that we'll have to pair. But if I get to teach my own special topics, my students come together from their credit-bearing course, and they a lot of times will form their own kind of support groups. They will do peer tutoring. I'm there to help tutor as well. Sometimes I will teach for 5 or 10 minutes if I can see. Of course, now it's harder to read students' faces as I'm teaching. But, you know, if I'm hitting something that I know that they're going to struggle with, that there's going to be some questions on, then we may start out and do some direct instruction from the very beginning with everybody. Sometimes they'll come in and ask questions. Sometimes I'll hit an integrated review, like in statistics. If we're about to go into the descriptive statistics chapter, then I go on and talk about rounding decimals just very quickly. I talk about the different decimal place values and just a reminder. And so that special topics looks a little bit different for everybody and every time we go. I'll be honest, right now we have them split and they're only coming one day a week. But the plan is to really monitor them, and then those students that need to come can come, and those other students, we're going to try to monitor them virtually and meet via Zoom. So a little bit different this semester, as everything with life is. And I'll talk about online in just a second. So most of the time, like I said, we teach our own CoRecs. We are small, so I know that that's not always the way it can be for everybody, but it is pretty magical. You get to know those students really well, and you get to know how they problem solve. Obviously, this picture was before COVID happened, but we will get there soon. We are all very personable teachers, and so we've all been like, how are we going to socially distance? How are we going to, figure out how to do tutoring? And so we're doing some Zoom work with students, and then we're using our big boards to bring up problems, and they're just shooting problems at me, and I'm working problems up here, and they can see it on, on their end. So we are just being as flexible as we can be. How do we grade the CoRecs? The CoRecs are a pass-fail course. And so all of us do it just a little bit different. Personally, mine is based off of attendance. And this semester I'm tracking attendance a little bit differently. If they're checking in with me, I'm seeing them virtually. I can see that they're working on Hawks, then I'm tracking their attendance that way. Typically, if it's a face-to-face CoRec, we require them to come, really an accountability type of thing. But more flexibility this semester. I also count their Hawks assignments in as part of their grade, and so that's what they're working on, and so that percentage counts for both the credit bearing and then their co-rec too. They do go hand in hand. It's either pass or fail. For obvious reasons, you don't want someone passing the co-rec and clearing the deficiency but failing the class. So that was something that happened the very first semester. We're like, oh, whoa, we didn't think about that. So we really had to go back and write a little policy about that, about, okay, this needs to go, because if a student has to retake a course, hopefully we don't have that many of those, but if a student has to retake the course, but they've been there every single time, we need to make sure they pair together. So just something to think about. We have our computer labs hold 22 computers. I'm not sure why the random number, but it's 20, they're all 22. And so that's where we cap those courses. It is a different syllabus, but it's similar to the objectives are the same. And then, like I said, our attendance policy is very strict typically, but we are looking at attendance, like we even had a conversation the other day as a group, attendance doesn't have to be face-to-face. What are some other ways that we can say that we're engaging with students? And so we said, maybe we need to look at it as student engagement. If the students are engaging in the coursework, then we're going to count that as attendance for this semester. And it'll be real interesting to see what aspects, how this even changes our co-rec model. We were talking about that the other day, about how that really putting some more responsibility on the students and giving them a little bit more freedom on if they choose to attend, and if they will be responsible about self-discipline about coming and getting their assignments done. So stay tuned. Hopefully we are good to go, but if they aren't, then I'll start hounding them and we'll get them there either virtually or face-to-face. So this summer was super fun. We went all online, of course, and we had some special topics, and we were planning on piloting a special topics online this fall, and we just said, hey, let's do it this summer. And so now we have 3 of our 4 pathways online, with all 3 having co-recs this fall. So I piloted it this summer actually, and it worked quite well. Danielle and I got to have several conversations about different ways of doing Hawks and working with integrated review. But I think we finally got kind of a good plan going. So the grade is based off attendance. Attendance looks different, obviously, for online. And so if they make contact, they have to initiate contact with me via email, phone, or Zoom. And this is similar to kind of what I'm doing face-to-face this semester even as well. That and the thought is that if they are initiating contact, then it's just one time for me to go in. It's accountability for me, because I go in and look to see if they've, working on assignments, and we get to have a conversation. Hey, how's life? Is everything going okay? Even if it's a short email conversation. So I count that as attendance, and then their Hawks assignments. And then I have let them choose 16 review assignments. So we're 16 weeks, so 1 per week, and ask them to go in and identify the skills. We actually did that yesterday. Go in and take a look. What are some things that maybe your weakness? What are some things that, and I went through and I told them some of the skills. Like I often had times have students have difficulty with fraction decimal percentage conversion. Hey, here's a lesson on that. If you have difficulty with some, algebraic expressions, hey, here's a review for that. So I let them go on and choose the review exercises. Did some of them probably go in and choose the easiest ones? Probably. But I will say I had a lot of students that actually went in and chose, when they got to choose those R's, they did choose the ones that they knew they needed help with, because I ended up tutoring them on Zoom quite a bit this summer. And so I'm hoping my students this fall will do that too, that I gave them a little bit of freedom to go on and choose, and then they were pretty good about self-disclosing what skills they actually needed to work on. And then I used a Google form, let's hope this link works, for tutoring, which has been a little bit of a lifesaver. And it just shoots me an email when somebody fills this out. And so this just sets in my co-rec. And of course, summertime's a little bit different because we don't keep normal office hours. And so this summer I was home with my children, and I'm not available all the time, and just to sit down and do math. And so I did this, but I'm actually doing it this semester too because it worked quite well. So they had to fill out the chapter and section that they need help with. I only tutor on one section at a time, mostly because 30 minutes of Zoom tutoring is about all that both of us could handle. But also, I didn't want someone to come in and saying, hey, I don't understand any of chapter 3. Like, okay, no, specifically, what do you need help with? They also have to spend 30 minutes of learn and 30 minutes in learn and 30 minutes in practice. And I literally go into my grade book and I pull those stats and I look. I'll nicely kind of nail them on that a little bit. Like, hey, it looks like you really only spent 2 minutes in learn. Hey, I'm happy to meet with you on Thursday, but before we meet on Thursday, really make sure that you've spent some time and learn. Really just not because I'm lazy, but really just trying to help them understand if you're going to take an online course, I'm here to support you, but you've got to be an independent learner. And there's so much structure. I give them the Hawks TV link. They have PowerPoints, they have notes, they have the learn, the practice. And so really just trying to teach them. So many of our transitional students don't know how to be a good college student. And right now I'm really trying to teach them how to be a great online student, because if this is their next couple of semesters, they are going to fail if we don't teach them how to be independent learners because of just the nature of higher education in general right now. And so they just fill that out, and then they get back to me, or they send it to me, and I send them a Zoom link, and we meet and we share screens, and it has worked beautifully. My pass rates this summer were comparable to pass rates in the previous summers when I taught face-to-face. So stay tuned for this fall. We have a lot of students online, as you can imagine. I've got a lot of students in my co-recs, and so I will let you know, but so far so good, and it really seemed to work with giving them, really, we just kind of treated them like adults. Like, you need to check in with us. You self-identify the skills you need help with. You fill out this form when you need help. And after you have exhausted all the things that you could do, and it actually, to be honest, I got less forms throughout the summer, and the content was getting more difficult. And it made me worried. I was like, oh, geez, they're tired of, meeting on Zoom for tutoring, but they were doing fine. It's just they got to where they were a little bit more independent. So, like I said, if you guys have ideas of things you're working with online co-recs, we don't have a lot of institutions in our state that are doing online co-recs. So I kind of exhausted all of my, I call a couple of people and used all of, utilized as many ideas as I can, but would love to hear what you have going on. So we were pretty excited. I'm going to skip ahead because I think I've already talked a little bit about some of these. We got some great quantitative data. I'll share that with you in just a little bit, but the qualitative data from our co-recs and our pathways is where it's at. These students just liking and loving the special topics class, loving the connection they get to make with each other, loving the connection they get to make with us, loving the connection they get to make with math. A lot of times it is the first time they have felt successful in a math course, and math is kind of the dirty word for a lot of students, and they just want to get it over with. And so it's really, it's been a pretty big blessing in our on our campus to really kind of remove that stigma, I guess, from math, and really make it more applicable. Our other instructors, our science instructors, are coming to us and have noticed an increase in students being able to apply math skills outside of the classroom, which would be, let's be honest, that's kind of the whole purpose, right? So pretty cool stuff. Oh, Melissa's not here. This was one of Melissa's students. I think he was quite a corker. I didn't ever get to have him. But it's been cool to see how special topics, the co-rec models have worked for a variety of students. So this guy is finishing his senior year, I believe, at Oklahoma State. working on a mechanical engineering degree. So, and came in at the developmental level and obviously a non-traditional student. So pretty cool. This is kind of just our breakdown showing what percentage of students go into what classes. I think this is from the fall, but this holds pretty true. I just wanted to show you. We actually have quite a few students enrolling in statistics now. Like I said, statewide, there's a little bit more of a push to that, but really once we kind of got that pathway going, we require it for our health science majors, and our nursing students go, and our psychology students. So that's a pretty big group. A lot of times our criminal justice students will take that as well. We started it, and once the word got around that, students were doing well and they liked it, we've really seen that pathway really fly. And that math functions, that pre-calc for business bio, the same, which is pretty cool, because what that's done is it's allowed, we only have about 10% of our students going in that, what was the traditional college algebra class, but for STEM majors, that 15-13, the pre-calc for engineering. And so it's really allowed those teachers to really up the rigor of those courses, or that course, and really prepare those students to go to Calc 1. And in fact, we really try to, the instructor that teaches the Calc 1 through 3 sequence, we often try to have her teach the pre-calc for STEM. So she actually goes on and rotates with those students, not always, but a lot of times. And that's been really good for them, because she absolutely is the one that knows exactly what they need for Calc 1. So she's been able to really push them and prepare them, as opposed to having some students that maybe weren't as ready for some of the concepts or the depth of the concepts. So this was the exciting part. Sorry, that's a little blurry. But when we moved in 17-18, so remember fall 17-18 was when we moved to the COREC model, and the 3 and then the 4th pathway came spring of 18. We went from a 57% completion rate to an 84%, and that's bounced back and forth. And we were really proud of that 78.5%. We didn't see our numbers, our completion rates go down in the spring. We worked really hard, as I'm sure you guys did, to track those students and to make sure we were still making connections and engaging them. But we were nervous, and so we really didn't see that number go down. So, we're hopeful that this year that we'll be able to retain students and get them through their college level math, and hopefully then, keep them, if that hurdle is over, then keep them engaged and enrolling and completing. But it's a little bit interesting because we made all those changes at one time. We can't say that it was one thing versus the other. And the other thing I probably should have mentioned is we moved to Hawks in fall of 17 too. So it was really just a beautiful but perfect storm of moving to 4 pathways, going full COREC, even though we went on and put 1 basic algebra in, but we're pretty much full COREC model. And then that instructional change with Hawks Learning and having the support that we were using another online program before, but didn't have quite the support. And we had a lot more griping about it. So I think it was probably a little bit of all of those that have really helped our students then maintain success. So I'll take some questions if you guys have questions, but you are more than welcome to email me. And like I said, I would love some collaborative ideas. If you guys have some online COREC ideas and you've got some stuff going on, then feel free to shoot those my way. We would love. And then Melissa Bryant and Dr. Goller, they both are also instructors that we've done some webinars before, so you've probably seen them. So.
Awesome. Emily, thank you so much. That was wonderful. So thorough. We did have just a handful of questions that I'd like to ask you, if that's okay. That was wonderful. So thank you. The first 2 are more logistical, and then we'll move to content. So just want to kind of spread them out if we can. But so one question that came through on chat, for students that take the lowest level, so the basic algebra course before the pre-calc, do they go into the COREC pre-calc for business bio, or do they go straight into just the standalone curriculum course? And I apologize if you already said that, but
I don't think I did. That's a great question. we've done it both ways.
Right.
So the first, because really the basic algebra would clear their deficiency.
Sure.
And so then after doing that one semester, we decided that those students really did, most of them wanted, to be honest, a lot of them wanted the co-rec. So we did go on and change that even if they take the basic algebra, then when they go into either pre-calc for business bio or STEM, they do go on and take the co-rec with them, and just making sure that we're still providing that level of support. Sometimes they don't need it as much, but a lot of times if they've self-identified that they wanted the basic algebra and they weren't super confident, then they still want that support of the co-rec.
Okay, awesome. And then if a student passes the co-rec but fails the collegiate course, just to confirm, is that a fail-fail?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was what we had to go back and change policy, because we didn't have that, like we hadn't thought that scenario through, and we had one student the first semester that happened to. And so, you know, on our system, it looked like he had cleared his deficiency. And so then he went to go back to re-enroll in the credit bearing, and it didn't put the co-rec in there. Well, I mean, obviously he still needed the support because he was basically just attending. So we also looked at our syllabi then and said, okay, we need to make sure that we're not, it doesn't need to be just attendance based. Like we need to put some plug in there with them, their grade being some of the review assignments, some of their homework assignments, or even a percentage of their credit bearing course assignments. Because I mean, let's be honest, one would think he wouldn't have a student attend. I don't think he had missed a class, bless his heart. He hadn't missed one single class, but like literally, I think just kind of checked out when he came in and didn't do a lot of work. So hopefully that doesn't happen very often.
And then do students get any credit towards graduation for the co-rec hours?
No, it's a 0 level course, and that's the way our prereqs were as well. So
okay, awesome. And then 2 questions about more on the content side of things. So how have you adapted your projects for your online distribution, you know, kind of move in the spring? Are they all individual? Do you do any group projects when you're online?
I do some group projects while we're online, not as many because it is, and I mean, you know, also with the nature we have, I was sharing with Alex and Danielle that we have a lot of our K-12 schools that are going back face-to-face, and now we're seeing them close, and that was the same in the spring. So I tried to be pretty cognizant of that. A lot of times I had students working at various times of the day, so I never made it where they had to like zoom in at a specific time. And I don't do that for my online classes, but there is one project that they do that's collaborative, and they have access through our LMS for each other, with each other's emails. But I pair them up and they do some peer review. I do, like for instance, one of my statistics course, they both find they decide on a statistical study to analyze, and then they both analyze it and they share their analysis with each other, and then talk about their differences, compare and contrast how, I mean, really just talking about how that you and I can read the same thing and get completely different, you know, reads on it. And so that would be an example. But yeah, we've had to be a little bit creative with some of our projects, with them being face-to-face versus online.
Sure. Thank you for sharing. And then one final question that came in. This instructor's university doesn't allow them to offer any 0 credit courses. Have you run into that with any people that you've networked with and talked about this through, or any ideas on how they might be able to implement this type of model without offering a 0 credit option?
I don't know. I mean, that's interesting. I'm wondering about how they do remediation then. I mean, I guess the structure, you could, to be honest, I would love it if they would offer some credit for it, because I mean, if students, not all our students really get that. Like, I don't know if they all really realize that, but the students that do are kind of bitter about it. I mean, at least with the co-rec model, it pairs with it. Mm-hmm. And so it's made it, you know, a little bit easier to swallow. Ours is a 3-hour, I mean, it's 3 and 3. So I know that there's a private institution in Oklahoma that I think they did something similar to that, but they only offered an hour. And so it was just an hour a week that they came, and it was either Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They did it very similar to ours, where it was a co-rec model, where it was just right after the credit bearing course. But I mean, I don't know if it really change how you would offer it. It would just depend on how you would get students to take it. You know, if they don't have to take it. I don't know. I need to know more about the situation. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you. And we had one last question, I think, come in. The 5 W's. Can you just summarize for me your 5 W's of, and that's okay.
Well, it was who, what, when, where, why, how, you know. I mean, that was just our structure for our webinar, but, you know, basically we're a small, you know, who we are, what we do. You know, we're educating students and just trying to get them through their developmental classes successfully and keep them and graduate them. And so that was, you know, kind of I did have those in my presentation, but it's not like a magical, like, you know, recipe or anything. So.
No, thank you so very much.
All right, well, that looks like that was the last question we had. I want to say thank you to you, Professor Carpenter, for doing this for us. And thank you to everybody that showed up and asked questions. If anyone does have any further questions that they want to ask, feel free to reach out to us at marketing@hawkslearning.com. We will be emailing this out. I know we had a question come in earlier, but we'll email this link out to the webinar so that you guys can view it later. And I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Bye,
Stay
Emily.
safe.